My enemy's enemy is my friend. This ancient proverb's guided diplomacy for thousands of years, including during World War II, the Korean War and the Cold War. But when we consider South Korea's relationship with Japan and genuine concerns their ongoing military standoff could lead to a crisis between themselves, or at least weaken their joint resolve on North Korea, what's the best way to approach Tokyo? You're watching Korea Now, and I'm Alex Jensen, taking a closer look at all this strife for you. And of course, please add your own comments below. While Seoul-Tokyo tensions are nothing new, they are at a particularly low ebb. The spat in question started before Christmas, with an encounter between a South Korean Navy destroyer and a Japanese maritime patrol aircraft. Now from there, it gets murky. Japan accused the South's vessel of dangerously locking a fire control radar on the Japanese plane. And that kind of radar can be threatening because it means an aircraft has just seconds to decide if it is really about to come under fire. But Seoul responded by claiming its destroyer was just searching for a North Korean fishing vessel in distress, and also later called on Japan to apologize for its aircraft's dangerously low flyby. As an attempt at clearing things up through working-level talks failed, we've seen the impasse continue, with claims of evidence and counterclaims satisfying neither side. Regrettable was the response by both South Korean Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa and her Japanese counterpart Taro Kono when they met in Davos on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum. And wherever you stand on the dispute, consider this more worrying language from the two sides' defense ministers. It might seem unthinkable, but could they actually be preparing for a physical confrontation? South Korea's Jong Kyung-do this week called for a lawful and strong response if Japan carries out another provocative act. Japan's Takeshi Iwaya also recently asked Maritime Self-Defense Force servicemen to strengthen their readiness to deal with any more incidents of this kind involving the South Korean Navy. Given Seoul has reported at least 3 further low-altitude Japanese flybys close to South Korean warships this month, concerns are naturally rising. One could see a flashpoint, for example, around the South Korean-controlled Dokdo Islets, which Minister Kono again just claimed as Japanese territory. Clearly, Tokyo isn't afraid of provoking Seoul either after escalating this radar row to such a public level. And we saw Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe quite obviously snub South Korea when he delivered his annual policy speech on Monday. This was his 7th policy speech since returning to power in 2012. Previously, he'd dedicated time to highlighting the importance of Japan's relationship with South Korea. But on this latest occasion, he skimmed over barely a mention of Seoul. However, we also have to be wary of overstating the risk of a military conflict actually breaking out. Japan has had similar radar rows before with China, and this current Seoul-Tokyo standoff suggests more of a freeze setting in than things heating up. The evidence is clear. Japan looks like it might pull out of a plan to send a helicopter carrier to South Korea for the start of a joint exercise involving Southeast Asian nations and other partner countries from the end of April. Minister Iwaya told reporters he's reviewing the matter. Seoul says a decision on that will be made in late February. And South Korea is making its own frosty moves, like cancelling next month's planned trip to Japan by Admiral Kim Myung-soo, the commander of the South Korean Navy's First Fleet. There's also political pressure for Seoul to pull out of its military intelligence sharing agreement with Tokyo. But even if South Korea and Japan don't engage in a direct fight, they risk weakening their joint stance that has been seen as an important part of reducing the potential threat from a still nuclear-armed North Korea. The risk is that the North, and perhaps China as well as Russia, would benefit much more from any Seoul-Tokyo military division than South Korea and Japan, allied as they both are to the US. And while US President Donald Trump seems unafraid to turn friends into enemies, we might do well to heed the advice of his predecessor, Abraham Lincoln, who asked, "Do I not destroy my enemies when I make them my friends?" Of course, it won't be easy. There's a lot of anti-Japanese government sentiment in South Korea over historical issues, particularly Prime Minister Abe's attitude towards the past. And there's also speculation he's using this radar row to rally support at home and to justify his militarization goals. That's why it probably needs dialogue between the leaders of both sides at this point, and hope that the wisdom of the ages prevails.